I'm complaining about how this ambulance is affecting my podcast.
You're trying to save a life. We're trying to record.
I'm trying to record my podcast.
Oh my God. Welcome to Cult Favorite, the podcast that did not have a cameo in Rosemary's Baby. I'm Merinda Simmons.
And I'm Mike Altman. What movie would we have a cameo in? I don't know.
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah. I don't know.
Answer us, dear listeners.
Yes. I can put that as the poll on the episode. I'm Mike Altman, and we are two religious studies professors trying to understand all of these cult documentaries that you can't stop binge watching. And we're going to be talking about trying to understand, holy hell, 22 years inside a modern cult that is on HBO Max and Amazon Prime, or Peacock and Amazon Prime. And but before we get there, if you want to support the show and help more people find us, you can follow us on all of the socials at Cult Favorite Pod. Also follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or leave a comment and a rating and a review so people will find us.
We've officially broken 1,000 listens.
Yes.
I'm excited about that.
We have.
Thanks, everybody.
We are growing thanks
You're
to
doing
you
the
all.
real work.
Yes. And but spread the word. Tell people about the show. It's great when we run into like the show. I always think of like the show in the wild when someone's like, oh, and I'm like, I didn't send you a link. I'm glad you found this.
Mm-hmm.
So,
content warning today. Yes. There's going to be some discussion of sexual abuse in this episode. So take care of yourselves. And if you need to take a week off, we get it. And we'll talk to you next week. What did you know before about the Buddhafield, Mike?
I didn't. I literally knew nothing. We decided, as we were like leaving the other day, you were like, well, let's do Holy Hell. And I was like, sure. And I didn't even know what it was about. And then I fired it up on the old iPad while I was in the kitchen cooking some stuff. And I was like,
to be fair, my recommendation was not 100% informed itself.
It was on the list.
But it was on the list. And
no.
I had seen it, but it was a while back. I don't know. But so the Buddhafield, is that a place where I was not clear about, like, is the Buddhafield like,
yeah,
they are a group inside the Buddhafield, or are they like members of the Buddhafield? Like, is that the name of the group? Is that a place that they go?
The real Buddhafield. The real Buddhafield is the friends we make along the way. So the idea of the Buddhafield, which is what the group calls themselves, as they talk about people coming to the Buddhafield, is is part of like Pure Land Buddhism, and it's this place that you basically, if you put your trust in the Buddha, Amitabha Buddha, then the Buddha will take you to the Pure Land, this sort of heaven. So it's like, let's not worry about like getting out of reincarnation because that's really hard. Let's just like let the Buddha, who has such grace and power, let's just take refuge in him, and then he'll get us to the Pure Land, and that's pretty rad.
But they never, at least from what we get access to, there's no talk about the Buddha, right?
No, there's no talk about the Buddha, and the Buddha. That idea of the Buddhafield or Pure Land Buddhism is like a kind of form of like Chinese Buddhism, and so it's very
still theologically patchworky. This group,
yeah, this is a lot of and we can. Well, it's not the first person to do this, and actually, it's interesting. There's a much earlier model of a sort of mysterious European person who shows up and no one knows where they came from. That then brings in all these Asian ideas that they sort of redefine. Like that's sort of
which is what happened here.
Happens here, but also like that's what happened in like the 1880s with Theosophy and Helena Blavatsky, who no one has made a documentary about, unfortunately.
Oh, well, maybe that's a bonus episode where we just talk about her.
So we knew nothing. You knew nothing?
I knew nothing. Just categorically nothing.
Knew nothing. So let me quickly, if you haven't seen it, I'll give you a quick synopsis. The sort of 3-act synopsis in a few minutes here. So it starts with Act 1, where Will Allen, the filmmaker, sort of director, producer, so he actually went to film school, comes home, tells his parents he's gay, and his mom kicks him out of the house. And his sister had already found the Buddhafield, and so she sort of says, "Come with me, come to West Hollywood, where and hang out with these people." And that's how he enters the group that he would be with for 22 years. And so the story is really like this first sort of movement is all about this this teacher who goes by
Michelle.
First Andreas.
First Michelle, and then
First
Andreas.
Michelle, then Andreas.
Yeah.
So Michelle, who is this sort of, they call him the teacher. He's their guru, and there's all this film. So while he's in the group, Will is like making films about the group and recording a lot of the group. And as it turns out, Michelle is an incredibly vain and self-important person who loves being filmed.
Yeah.
Which again, another example of like something about these groups. They love to document themselves. And
I mean,
what?
So does mainline Christianity.
True.
I mean, true. I don't know that that's like particular to these groups, but and also so do people with TikTok accounts, and so do, I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's not like there's a bunch of like.
The Garden didn't like being filmed.
Tree liked being filmed.
There's
not a lot, like
as long as he was filming, as long as he was the one filming.
I don't know that there's reels and reels and reels of like, a Lutheran church in Wisconsin in the same way.
I mean, okay, we'll circle back to that. But I take your point. Yes.
So Michelle is has assembled this group of like very beautiful, interesting people, and he is teaching a kind of like. So one of the central things he's talking about is like Shakti, and the film, because it's sort of quite literally Will's perspective, in the way it's made, we don't get a ton about like the kind of theology or philosophy behind the teaching, but like the Shakti idea, it's a kind of South Asian philosophical idea of the sort of energy that's sort of in the body. And if you've ever like the chakra talk, have you ever heard the sort of people talking about the chakras?
Yeah.
So the chakras are these sort of like
energy centers.
Yeah,
right?
These energy centers that run up your spine, and then Shakti is like the energy. It's usually gendered feminine in the philosophy, and it is so. There are various practices depending on what tradition you're talking about that the Shakti is going to move up your spine like a snake. And then there are by the time it's sort of full and reaches your mind, you've now got these sort of ecstatic experiences. And so it's a kind of like it's similar. It is a very broad kind of like philosophical theological category. So it's almost like if someone said like grace in Christianity can mean all sorts of things, right?
Sure.
It's just sort of very broad and can be interpreted lots of ways. Here. Michelle, it's a kind of force that not only can you rise up, do you have inside you, and you have to kind of like conserve, but it can be like imparted by his touch. So there's all of these times where he puts his hands on people, and sort of the Shakti is supposed to give them an ecstatic experience, which is actually not that far afield from integral yoga, which has had its own scandals. So this is not a new idea in any sense. And integral yoga is happening about roughly the same time. And then, so he has this big group of people, and then the kind of big moment is in 1989. He gives his followers the experience he calls the knowing, which is this intense experience of Shakti energy. They have like a retreat in the woods, and there's film of this that Will has of like convulsions and
because like they're directly experiencing God,
right?
Is the idea?
Yeah. So it's a direct experience of He says God, so there's this like dualism that's not sort of normal in the way you talk about Shakti, but this sort of this experience, and like there's interviews that Will has with the same people, sort of contemporaneous, and like I guess the 2010s when he's making the film, where they talk about like what they felt and the experiences they had and all of that. And so there's that. And meanwhile, there's also sort of Michelle has this interesting kind of theology of the body where like sex, and this is not actually uncommon either, the idea that sex expels your energy, your Shakti. So you have to conserve and there's a
orgasm as death.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, because a lot of in what you would call tantric traditions in India, oftentimes there are practices that are supposed to raise your Shakti energy that are sort of sexual practices that don't lead to orgasm or aren't supposed to end in orgasm because they're supposed to raise the energy but then not expel it, right? So he's sort of drawing on that here, but it's also this weird contrast because the dude loves a Speedo. He loves other people in Speedos.
This is the Miami Vice treatment that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Tall socks, Speedo,
Ray-Bans,
tan torso.
Yeah. No, it's
a look.
It is a look. I mean, it was obviously giving me 80s wrestler looks.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah,
sure,
it's the same vibe.
Sure.
It's the same.
Okay.
He has Ric Flair chest.
Well, we are going to talk about the myriad levels of performance happening in this group. So we'll get there.
And then the other piece of this kind of first sort of what is the Buddhafield? What are they doing? Is and I think it's the one that I'm most curious about, but I don't have any answers for, is the idea that Michel was a hypnotherapist and that he would hypnotize people and he had some sort of almost paranormal what's that, mind powers, like the dad in Christmas Story, but some sort of like hypnotic powers that he's putting people into these states. So that's 80s yuppie Buddhafield.
Yeah.
Ray-Bans and Speedos and bikinis, and then things start to break. There's sort of two big events and then a few sort of smaller things that continue the fissures in the group. So first, there's a guy named Kenny who wants to date a member of the group, but of course you're not supposed to date or have sex or any of these things, and so he gets frustrated. He's stalking the woman who's in the group, and then calls the Cult Awareness Network, which
was still a relatively new phenomenon at the time.
So we're so if you've been following along with us in this sort of mid 80s, late 80s period, this is sort of post Jonestown.
Yeah,
it's really the story of Jonestown survivors and friends and relatives are the first, but then others join in these groups that are sort of anti-cult groups. And they will go in and kidnap someone who they think has been kidnapped by a cult and then take them to be deprogrammed by a psychologist of some sort. And so the Cult Awareness Network gets involved. This freaks everybody out. And Michelle flees in the middle of the night.
With only 3 people.
Yeah, with Will. And one of the pieces of this is, and a body worker, is that massage is kind of central to this in a certain way, and service as a kind of service to Michelle as a kind of a practice in the group. And so they flee to Austin, Texas, and Michelle changes his name to Andreas.
Yeah.
And then once they're in Austin,
really because he's going off the grid, he wants to be under the radar of people trying to find him.
Right.
So it wasn't I'm changing my name because of some sort of I don't know, moment of a different mode of enlightenment of whatever. It was a strategic move to try to not be found as easily, right?
Yeah. And to be able to still recruit people, but not be the same guy recruiting people. And then Waco happens. The Branch David, the FBI and ATF raid of the Branch Davidian compound that leads to all sorts of death and violence.
Which is not too far from Austin. And that freaks everybody out. Sure.
And in the Austin era of this whole thing, Andreas Michel becomes much more controlling. He's really into ballet and
because he was an actor.
Yes.
And he had a cameo in Rosemary's Baby.
Yes, he did.
Do you have to be famous to have a cameo? Is cameo maybe a category reserved only for you have to be a known quantity such that your presence in a thing means that it's a cameo instead of just a role? So maybe he didn't have a cameo.
I don't know. There are no small cameos, only small actors.
Sure. There was a moment in Rosemary's Baby where Mia Farrow enters a room
and he looks at the camera.
Yeah.
And that's it.
So
yes. And then there is he builds a theater and he has all these dance rehearsals. And then he builds a garden with a bunch of birds.
Mhm.
And he becomes more and more controlling. He gets Will to make a music video
Mhm.
that is wild.
Yeah.
And then
Femme fatale.
Femme fatale, yeah.
About
And
the
then
dangers of sexuality.
yes,
Mhm.
in which it ends with the woman getting hit by a dump truck.
Mhm.
And then his control increases, like don't watch TV, don't read the news. You can't have it. Tells one lady she can't have a dog.
Mhm.
And this sort of builds and builds. Some people are leaving. Some people are like, this isn't what it used to be.
Because it's gone from enlightenment to just his ego.
Yeah.
Like we're just focusing on him.
Once you get it, there's a feeling that once they get to Austin, that it kind of becomes, he's kind of building his own like fantasy land in a way. And so that all hits in 2006 when this is 21 years into Will being a part of the group. There's a letter from someone who leaves the group that is just full of accusations about Andreas having forced young male disciples into sex. And then a bunch of other stories come out to rebut it. I mean, to corroborate it. Andreas denies all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Will feels conflicted because at this point he's been with this guy and serving him for 21 years.
But is also one of his victims.
But it then comes out that he's also one of his victims. That's the way there's a, Will as a filmmaker does a very good job, I think, of the sort of the moments of revelation as the story goes.
Right.
So they basically like take him to Hawaii.
Well, because he wants it to stop.
Yeah.
And there's this big rift in the group where some people believe the letter, some people don't. And Will and a few other people are like, this just needs to end. We will relocate you and then go away.
Yeah. And
so it was a way to like,
well, he does try one last ditch effort of doing a kind of like the knowing part 2.
Andreas does.
Like, no, I'm still the teacher. And it doesn't work.
It kind of backfires.
Yeah. They're like, wait, this is terrible. This is not at all like the other one.
Yeah.
Which is interesting for a number of reasons. Yeah. So they basically take him to Hawaii and sort of like leave him there and say, we're done. And then the film, you get a bunch of sort of analysis from various former members, a lot of these harrowing stories from the survivors, people trying to talk about what was good about it or what they got out of it anyways. A lot of it is really like their loyalty to the group sort of surpassing their loyalty to Andreas Michel, who once he gets to Hawaii renames himself again of Reiji. And then the sort of apex moment of the film is in the kind of contemporaneous, moment in the 2010s when he's making this, Will going back to Hawaii with one other survivor, and he puts a camera in his shirt pocket, so you have this sort of almost like point of view shot of him confronting Michel Andreas Reiji, who has at this point had a variety, like has that plastic surgery look.
It was a very unsatisfying confrontation. I mean, it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what a satisfying one would be, but like, I think that it goes to show just how closure for these kinds of things just don't exist.
Yeah.
And so in that way, it was really effective, even as it was really unsatisfying, because he's like, I mean, he's gone through all of this stuff. He has made this film. He goes over there, and there's not really he's like, so what are you doing?
Yeah.
What,
he's like, he asked him, have you been a good boy?
Yeah. And he's just like, I'm just living life. I'm just like, it's a really interesting, very fraught, moment.
Yeah. And then that's sort of the big moment, and then you get these. It closes with these video portraits that Will had shot back in 2007 of a variety of people who were in the Buddhafield, and he kind of tags them as left or stayed, and then we find out at the end that most actually, even the people who said stayed, have actually left by this point.
And a lot of them are still in touch. I mean, the ways that community really stuck together in the midst and throughout, or at least the way that they talk about how much that community continues to mean to them, just in terms of like interpersonal relationships, was really powerful.
Yeah. So that's the summary. So
Okay.
Merinda, what do you want to talk about?
Oh my God.
What did you get out of this?
I have three main things, but they're all connected. And I mean, so one of them is this role of performance on a lot of levels. Will has two sisters, the one who brought him into the group in the first place, and then a middle sister, Lori, who calls Michelle an out-of-work actor who stumbled into the role of a lifetime. I thought that was an interesting characterization. But he, was very invested. I mean, I guess continues to be. Like he has reformed a group that apparently is like over 100 people in Oahu.
Yeah.
So I guess he's still going, but
yeah, he seems
and some
to
of
be.
the people who were in the initial Buddhafield traveled with him and did stay with him because that's how he began amassing a new following. But he's really invested in making the group as much about like dancing and acting with his ballet classes and videos that he makes and such as he is enlightenment. And so I thought that was just it was a really interesting it was an interesting pairing. Sorry. So like he's an actor. He came to America to be an actor, right? Or he moved to California.
He came to be a star.
From a wealthy family, moves to the US, tries to make it big in Hollywood, does some porn acting for a while, which was kind of like a revelation later for people. But he really keeps present that motivation with all of the enlightenment stuff. Most of them hated the dance instruction, but like the bond with the community was enough to keep them in it. So there's that kind of just like literal level of performance.
Yeah.
But this is the first, I think, isn't it the first documentary that we have looked at that is like from a first person perspective?
Yeah.
And so just the degrees of proximity and distance with personal narrative, I thought was really interesting. We see it kind of happening in real time with like the interviewees using second or third person to talk to Will. About Will to Will. Talk about Will to Will. Because some people will say, you, if I had known what was going on with you, like you and I were really close, that kind of thing. But then we also get like his family, for example, his sisters and his mother are talking about him in third person. So I don't know I don't know. Those layers were really interesting to me.
Do you think he did? I mean, we don't know. Do you think he did the interviews with his mom?
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, but like it is very much this is very much his project.
Yeah.
Like it's very clear that he's making this for his reasons to like create to tell this story, but also to create a sense of some kind of processing or closure for the group itself
and for himself, obviously.
And so so the links that the group went to fulfill Michelle's like literal and figurative stage fantasies, the building and rebuilding of a theater. There was a really orchestrated, very elaborate ballet performance that happens at one point where they like practice for a year and then perform it for themselves. I don't know.
Which made me think about all of the like talent shows that the Heaven's Gate people did, right? There is a thing where when a group is like cutting itself off from all these exterior, like no TV, whatever, then you have to like
create your own entertainment.
And so, or create, or like having a project that everyone's invested in. And I think in some ways it's like they were all invested in these projects early on, but by the time we get to Austin, not so much.
In the case of Heaven's Gate, though, Doe was not like the star of every show.
No, not at
right?
all. No.
It was the kind of the opposite. And in this case, it's very much a vehicle for Michelle's own acting. It's like I don't know. I mean, well, no, edit that. Sorry. I was going to give a metaphor about a, home karaoke machine, but I'm all for those. Don't All right. So yeah, that's one of the things is the level of performance. Speaking of fantasy and performance, another thing that I thought was really interesting was masculinity, the ways that it is staged and performed and fantasized. Like, I don't think that it's an accident that many of these group leaders are men. Like, I don't think that that's a cult or charisma phenomenon. I think that that's just like a super basic byproduct of patriarchy. So I don't know, like the way that Michelle was staging his own masculinity as in such a way that I guess when you're looking at it through a video, it seems super weird and wacky. I don't know. I
it
is and it isn't.
What's interesting is like at its sort of most, he's probably at his most powerful in that first sort of like 5 or 6 years before, when the groups gets pretty big, and before Waco and before the Kenny thing and all that. When he's sort of at his most powerful, there's a couple shots and you realize that like he is himself performing a certain kind of masculinity, but then all of the men in the group, they all start looking just like him.
Sure.
And so it's not like, that was what was striking when they cut to the like 2010s Hawaii. And I'm like, oh, his group members are not nearly as hot as they were in the 80s. Because they were very different looking even from one another and from him.
Right.
But like there's a shot of Will with him, and you see sort of Will when he starts joining the group in the 80s. And then there's this shot like in the late 80s, and he looks just like he's got like slightly longer hair, but he's got the same build and he's wearing the same Speedo and all that.
And that was on purpose, right? Like he would, Michelle would like tell them to, or encourage them to get very specific kinds of plastic surgery. So plastic surgery was a big presence in the group. Everybody was working out all the time. And I get why. Like some of the former members talk about like what seems like this really extreme dichotomy between his teachings about the body, like it's gonna die, it's a sack of meat, we need to transcend it, and his like really juvenile caricatures of sex as he's explaining this is something that steals your energy, you shouldn't do it. So that on one hand, these teachings of the body, and then his own vanity with the plastic surgery and the makeup and the exercise and this like 80s machismo, that on the other. I get why that seems like those two things are at odds, but I kind of, and so this is another thing I want to talk about and get your take on, because I think that they're coextensive, or at least like two sides of the same coin, because his dismissal and hatred and insecurity about the body is also what I think it's like it's the fuel for the engine of cosmetic alteration, and closeted abuse. Because we only put strict boundaries around the things that we feel like need policing, and something only needs policing if it is not a stable entity in its own right. So like, if masculinity is this across time and space, always and forever, like stable phenomenon of human existence, well, we wouldn't care if little boys wear skirts, because it's not going to shake masculinity, because masculinity is like some capital M unshakable thing. So we police gender boundaries, we create gender boundaries and sexual boundaries around the things that like we feel like need policing. So I don't know. I thought that the hyper performance of a specific kind of masculinity and, sexuality, even in the
and I don't, because I don't know that we like I don't know that sort of argument happens around, say, like, it's like super like purity culture, like women in purity cultures of various sorts that often, are doing the same sort of
10,000%.
Yeah, doing the same sort of work body on themselves.
Why do fathers need to give like rings to their daughters and take them on a dance and put them in a very specific dress?
Right.
Unless like something called femininity was like a very malleable thing.
And so like we don't like so to go back to the Mormon wives, for example, like I don't see a lot of people saying like, why would these Mormon wives who are supposedly in this very sexually repressed culture, and even the ones who are very sexually repressed, like, why are they spending money on plastic surgeries of various sorts, and why are they made up in these various ways? Like, we don't like. There's a way that's sort of accepted around femininity in a way that masculinity is like, oh, that's somehow inconsistent. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
and for them, it's edgy,
right?
Like, it's something kind of a little taboo in the faith, but not anything that ultimately shakes that foundation for them. And I mean, I think it's edgy, but not weird or gross or whatever, because we expect women to uphold a really specific artificial beauty standard that men are supposed to, I don't know, transcend in some way.
Well, or that like, and that somehow we don't like so Michelle Andreas as a man is somehow, well, the doesn't have the same standards, therefore it's weird to want to try, want to try, it's like the Instagram ads I get. I've really like I get these Instagram ads because Meta's algorithms are very, very kind of blunt for these shirts that they target toward like 40-year-old men that are supposed to make their dad bods look less chubby.
Are you feeling defensive
No,
about
this?
Great. We create boundaries around the things we feel.
No. But they're these shirts. It's like, and it's like there's a part of me that's like kind of glad these ads exist, because I feel like it's probably I don't know if good's the right word, but I'm okay with dudes feeling bad about their bodies a little bit, or having to like buy something. Like, I don't know. There's something about it that I feel is like, I'm
not okay with anyone feeling bad about their bodies. I think that sucks.
Not bad, but
sure.
Like, I'm like, I don't know. I don't have a problem with
it. You want to take some of the heat off of women feeling.
I'm like, sure.
Sure.
But yeah. Anyways. I make
Wait, so you get these shirt ads and what?
But my point is like they stand out because they stand out because they're the only ads like that that I get.
Right.
Like, very rarely do I like, it's the only ad I get where there's like some woman being like, my husband bought this shirt and now he's hot, right? As like that's the pitch.
Meanwhile, like, women's social media algorithms are full of clothes and makeup and skincare all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Whether they've bought it or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. The last thing that I wanted to make mention of that I think is really the most important thing that stuck out to me, but that is interconnected with these other issues is how we think about abuse in its own right, because we should take nothing away from Michelle's abuses, right? Zero things at all. They were horrific. They were structurally perpetuated over the course of years for multiple people. So take nothing away from that. But like, in the same way that there are different layers of performance, there are also layers of abuse, and it never exists in a vacuum. So, as I mentioned this before, like, or you mentioned the very beginning, that like the initial plot point of the story is Will goes to film school. He comes home from college. He tells his parents he's gay, and he gets kicked out of the house. Like, and so he was always a searcher, asking big questions about why we're here and what's the meaning of life and stuff. So like, sure. But also he doesn't have a home to go back to after college because he's gay.
Yeah.
And so they're kicking him out when he gives them this information is also abuse.
Yeah.
And his sister Lori, who was initially drawn to the group as a place where she could find community in the wake of disordered eating and rape trauma. Like, what tools was she getting at home? Any? So like there is totally very much a story to tell about the Buddhafield, what happened in its midst. And so I'm glad he did it. I'm like I am here for that process. I think that cult as a category yet again like rears its head and allows us to sweep away or at least not pay a ton of attention to the traumas that are perpetuated in the name of traditional, totally sanctioned religious beliefs that do not receive cult doc treatment.
Yeah.
And so his mother I think Gina, old Gina, I think is the I don't know, the kind of absent presence or present absence, I guess, in the documentary for me.
Because she's interviewed. I mean, she appears in the documentary, but she doesn't.
When they come home and they say, because the members of the group also kind of undergo name changes when they become members. They come home and visit her and say, we don't hear a lot about his dad, so we don't know like where he was in this whole picture, but like they come home, they say, these are our names, we would like you to use them, please. And she's like, nope. These are the names that I gave you. So and it's like, man, okay, but you want to understand how like human codependency works inside of like tight-knit groups that are looking for belonging because they have structural dispossession in their own families. Yeah. Like that's also abuse.
Yeah. And I think, you see it in the whole first 45 minutes of the documentary. You have all of these stories where it's like I think he even says at one point, I fell in love with the people before I fell in love with the teacher. Like the community is like, and then the role that Michelle plays in the early years as giving these people sort of purpose. They talk about service, right? And like some of that is massaging Michelle and dancing with Michelle. And
oh my God, but Julian's story about the fruit salad.
That's what I was about to say. Yes, the fruit salad, right? He talks about like making him a fruit salad every day.
Oh my God. And was like teary even in the telling.
Yeah. And then so he says that, his service was he would make a fruit salad for Michelle every day. And then one day he discovered that he was pouring the fruit salad into a blender and making a smoothie with it.
These fruit salads were like, he was carving the Last Supper out of these fruits. Yes. He was making portraits. He was doing like, edible arrangement I was about to say, art.
Like this puts edible arrangements to shame.
Oh my God. Art.
That should have been we're the podcast that will never blend your fruit salad.
But truly, I mean, but like even now, and it was really, I don't know, it was meaningful to see like how emotionally charged a lot of these stories that they tell even now remain.
But my point was, with the fruit salad is he then says, and he kept making them because for him it wasn't about. It was about it gave him a purpose to do this. That's right. And I think that language of purpose is one of the ingredients that we see. Like it's a thing. Like people, when you have people who, like you're saying, like in Will's case, who are kicked out or don't have a space or don't have a family, like family and purpose was what kept coming up in those first 45 minutes. And it's a way. And there's all sorts of like. It's a real human need that can be filled in lots of healthy ways. But what's remarkable is how quickly it can be filled in like, in a way that that leads to like horrible abuse.
Of course.
And there's also there's a spectrum, right? Like there's
Mhm.
ways that it can lead to just, labor exploitation or whatever.
Sure.
But it's a pitch that you see all the time.
Vera, she was one of the former members who was controlled in such a way that like she was not able to see her dying father to like go visit her dad, or she had 2 abortions that she didn't want to have because Michelle told her that like kids could not be born in the group. But when she finally leaves, she's got like $45 and no bank account.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so she was doing all of this service in the same way though, like because I mean, it really did function for them in a powerful way.
Yeah.
Michael, what would you like to talk about today?
So 2 things. First
Okay.
is because we've hit on some of it, but is the uniqueness of this documentary in terms of its perspective, and the kind of having it literally be from the perspective of somebody who was in the group, someone who survived abuse in the group, and just also was a person who knew how to make make art through film, and then did that. So there's something of that I really liked about the film, sort of aesthetically as a piece of art and as a thing, that was just a very different take, made for very different reasons than most of the other stuff that we've looked at. So that for me,
and did you found that effective? Like,
I found it enjoyable and refreshing. I think it reminded, and it got me thinking about like, when it comes to sort of the cult doc genre, there's not a lot that I can't think of nothing we've come across like this
that humanizes people that way.
That humanizes, and that is like,
you know which one I thought came close?
What?
The one that you didn't like about Jonestown.
Maybe, but I think what it is like when you watch this from Will's perspective, I don't find myself wondering like why it makes so much sense why he was there in a way that actually I didn't think Jonestown did per se.
Okay.
I think watching this might actually help people understand, the Jonestown thing more. But yeah, so I really appreciated the way it was like, okay, it wasn't this could happen to you or someone you love.
Sure.
But it was like, no, I could see how this could happen.
I'm just telling my story.
I could see how this could happen easily to any number of people,
because it was leading with empathy and
yeah. I mean, what it made me realize because of the way it was told, it's like, and because it starts with that first beat of like him getting kicked out of the house by his mom, it's like there are people who have this experience and for a variety of reasons, a variety of ways. Like pick your reason for getting kicked out of your house or whatever.
Yep.
And it is like which social net you happen to fall into.
Yeah.
Like his sister was already there for her own reasons.
We all literally need them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and it's like it takes a village to help a human survive.
And so like it made me think about like, not anti-cult in the sense of like the anti-cult network, but like what are no one makes documentaries about the places that people who get kicked out of the house wind up in,
unless they're like advocacy, But
it's not like, and so I ended up, at this, coffee shop or whatever where someone was super nice and I found friendship, and then I, like all sorts of various, serendipitous ways people end up where they end up. But so I thought that was, I really appreciated the way it made that a very universal experience. I guess it's not universal in the sense that everyone has it. Everyone gets, finds themselves ostracized in some way, but in the sense that it's a thing that happens all the time.
There was also like, I mean, the ways that the community, I don't know how, tightly knit they still are as a collective, right? Maybe not, but I forget who it is that is talking to Will near the end that says, I try not to think about the negatives too much. I'm thinking about the positives that I went away with. And that's like this, like you and me talking, and the connection that we have. And there is, so there's that, there's like who is it? It's Philippe who says that like I love myself so much now.
Yeah.
I love who I am now, and I love my life now.
And he's like, I can't say I regret it.
So I can't say I regret it. Julian, who made the fruit salads, whom I love Julian so much, but he talks about how like categorically terrible and harrowing and beautiful, like it's all of the things. So there's but then we also see like especially the women in the group who are not subjected to the same kinds of abuse, but who love these, they call them their brothers, right?
Yeah.
And for them, they are still struggling so much with just how could I not know that this was happening to you, because I would have wanted to help you. And so that's so painful for them. So there's this spectrum of just outcome for like different people who went through this experience. But it was all, I don't know. I found it really moving.
Interesting too. If you was paying attention to like a lot of them in the background of their interview shots, they still have like little Buddhist or Hindu stuff around. So like there's a sense that like they took something out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think like, so that was the one thing. And then the other thing I think is like something that I've often tried to think through and haven't ever really figured out, but like, what do we do with ecstatic religious experience? Because that's what keeps people there initially. Like it's the knowing event in 1989 when, and you see in the documentary, like people having these experiences, and that seems to be like the proof in the pudding. What do
you mean, like do with it? Because I mean, it's also present inside of just like, American Pentecostalism.
Yeah.
So what do you mean?
I don't know what to do with it there either. I think.
What do you think can be done? Or do you like, what are you trying to make sense of? Like there was something real, like it demonstrates some kind of empirical reality that.
Yeah, like I wonder
of effectiveness or something.
This is just probably my own theoretical hang up, but like on the one hand, like you can choose your reductive theory of choice. Like you want to do the deprivation theory. Do you want to do is it a cognitive thing we can talk about, right?
Of like why they are in the group?
Whence the experience.
Oh, okay.
Like what's happening.
Okay.
What is happening?
Sure.
Right? Like what is happening when we see that on, like what is happening in that moment? Where is that coming from? Is this purely psychological? Is it purely chemical? Is it so like what's the thing? So like I've never been convinced of any account to try to make sense of that.
Sure.
I also don't think that, like, I don't want to be like, it's Shakti, obviously. Like, I don't want to let that stand, right?
Yeah.
And so I was very kind of like, to me, that there's this, it's an interesting puzzle. And I don't know that I need to have an answer for it, per se, but like, it is a thing that, like, I'm happy to be like, I don't know what to do with it. But it what I think is interesting in this case is it's the thing that really like kept people there, or kind of that was the proof that he was who he said he was, right? And similarly with the hypnotherapy, like I don't know enough about hypnotherapy to know like what's going on with that, and this is sort of put up there as this kind of thing, but there's sort of a kind of like a black box of like, this happened and everyone in the film experienced it and could talk about it in various ways, and then it didn't work that one time,
but they were in a much less like suggestible space the second time, right? And so even in the first sense, when Will talks about his own experience, he's like, there's no denying the beauty that I felt, but I also thought that maybe in that moment I was getting in a little too deep. And we see people like coming away from that experience sobbing and stuff, and they've really had But like, I don't know. I guess I think that there are probably a lot of examples of, like when you said that Shakti is like talking about grace, like this, it's this abstraction that can mean loads of different things to loads of different people.
Yeah.
I think that the somatic effects of like devotion or bliss or service or connection or like can look a lot of different ways too. And so, you know, like I don't love it when, you know, people use the word psychosomatic as if it's like not real, you know, like because there's still something somatic happening.
Yeah.
And so you know, people, whether you hold fast to the idea of some kind of transcendent, you know, like realm that you can be transported to, or whether you think that it's like a psychosomatic byproduct of exploiting people in highly suggestible states, there's still something happening in and with their bodies regardless. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm going to use that to segue to my takeaway because it's related. Because you were talking about performance, and like I think that was actually part of my takeaway was there's a moment was the idea that like reality, like you're saying, like reality is actually really thin.
What even is reality, man?
No, I mean, not to do the like stone 2 a.m. dorm conversation, but also a little bit like, but like,
I'm here for you,
Mike.
Well,
no, but what I got, there's a moment where one of this, I think it was Philippe, I can't remember who, but he talks about like, he sort of says like, was any of this real? Is it an act or is it real? And talking about Michelle.
David.
That
was David, and then he's acting in the video. And then he's like, I'm having this Shakti moment on film. So,
and then he goes, is it an act or is it real? And then he says, and then you ask, am I acting? And there's this moment of like, the realization that the line between acting and reality is so thin is the only adjective I can think of, but it's not stable. It's not even plastic. And I'm making weird hand gestures, which are very effective for a podcast.
Well, it's a porous. It's not a fixed boundary. It's not. Yeah. It's not a solid.
Yes, and not to go too full like pro wrestling brain, but like there's this idea of kayfabe, which is lots of different meanings, like Shakti. But it's it's broadly speaking the sort of fictional world of professional wrestling that's often not as fictional as we think. And so there's some theater and performance studies scholars who have written about this, and Eero Lane, who I love his definition of kayfabe is like actually it's the truth that they want you to believe, right? And who the they is could be the writers of a wrestling show, but it could also be like a government, whoever, right?
Yes.
And I think that what you get is like it is not just in cults, but these are very, I think, stark examples because they are these sort of all-encompassing communities with their own realities. This like, but you get this that there is this sort of kayfabe, and it doesn't feel like acting until it does.
Yeah.
Right. And then and so there's a way for me that the takeaway was thinking about like that moment of the knowing in 1989 versus the knowing in whatever it was, like 2000 or whatever.
Yeah.
That's like that happens all over the place. Yeah. Right. Because the realities that we live in are what we see is real, what feels real, what is the experiences we have are so deeply contextual. And that doesn't mean that Shakti has to be an actual energy force inside your chakras for it to still, like you're saying, have these sort of somatic responses.
I think that's that idea of like who wants you to believe what and what informs that is my takeaway too, because like Will's mom needed him to believe the homophobia that she had internalized, that maybe her parents needed her to believe, which just the layers of that kind of psychological and emotional trauma that does not let someone be who they are, that you have to perform otherwise in order to render yourself socially legible inside of this family unit group.
Yeah.
Okay. Is its own. Yeah.
Is that why the confrontation in Hawaii is so flat? Because the real confrontation would be with his mother.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. Like,
not to psychos.
No, like, for sure. And I mean, I don't want to. Yeah, I don't know that I have a word for but yeah, I actually think it was like really full and rich, but yeah, like so I don't think it was flat, but like the way that it came off was this like, very stilted kind of.
Yeah.
It wasn't staged in the way that the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives would be, right? Where the confrontations are so direct and intense and full of words, like. Or passive aggressive beyond belief, but like I mean, I just think that there is no one person to confront, I guess. I mean, Michelle, absolutely, again, take zero things away from his abuse. Oh my God. But that abuse exists inside of a context where, I mean, lots of the men that we hear from talk about, like, I had never had sex before.
Right. Yeah.
I was still figuring out my own relationship to sexuality and masculinity.
Yeah.
I didn't have, I mean, that story, I think, is rich and multi-layered.
Well,
and yeah.
I mean, it's at that level, it's a story. You have these men who joined this group at, like, you know, in their early 20s. In most cases. So it's like in a group that then says like, and no sex. Right. And it's like, and
everybody was having sex. Right.
Yeah.
But it was on the DL. Like people were having sex and just not talking about it, of course. But I just like, there is no one monster. There are monsters to confront.
Yeah.
Make no mistake. But I also hate the word monster because it's like, that kind of like exceptional evil is never embodied by a single person in the way that Will's mom wants to believe. And she does this whole thing of like, I don't want to hate, but you know, da 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 da, and he's like evil and stuff. And it's like, yeah, it's useful to think that, right? Because what that allows us not to look at is how sexuality is treated inside of a social like space that can't deal.
I almost like, I don't think
like he was already in a social space that couldn't deal with sexuality. Like,
well, so yeah, I mean, I think so. Two things. And then like on the one level, I think your argument that the mom commits the first original sort of chronologically first abuse
as a byproduct of abuses that were committed against her, right?
Exactly.
To make her brain warped to think that she needs to kick out herself, like blah 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 blah.
Right,
like
but I think that's actually
abuse is all the way down.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's actually the I think that's actually like a really interesting point, though, is that like it's easy to follow the mom's argument about, and then it would be easy to counter with, well, actually the mom's the real monster, but actually it's like, no, there is an entire production system here, which then makes me think like, I'm not saying like if you wanted to confront Michelle, like go for it,
right?
But I do wonder, in some ways, the one response to that would be, if that's the case, then it's kind of to follow, like, I guess it was Philippe or David, like, then we don't need the confrontation in the film, whatever he wanted to do on his, for his own reasons, but we don't need the confrontation in the film that the 2007 video portraits is actually where it would work without that, in a way that would say, it's about all of these people who
Yes.
ended up in this space.
Well,
and et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Whether that element, worked or didn't. I thought that the Snow Patrol notwithstanding, I thought that the video portraits at the end was really the. I like how it ended. I thought that was its own like really great takeaway. It's people who, nonetheless forge community.
Yeah.
People who like figure out how to take care of themselves in a way that makes sense for themselves. And
After you just dismiss Snow Patrol, I will not make Death Cab for Cutie my cult favorite. What is your cult favorite, Merinda?
Oh my God!
Maybe I'll pick the national.
3 doors down to Death.
There's a new national live from Rome coming out soon. Go ahead.
Okay, so speaking, I guess, of forging community in the face of just ambient social angst, there was an event hosted and sponsored by the North American Association for the Study of Religion on Saturday that you were very nice to come to. Thank you very much.
It was lovely.
That featured a conversation between Christopher Brew. He's a professor at Illinois State University and just a all-around brilliant gem of a human. A conversation between him and religious studies professor Donovan Schaefer, who is also awesome, about Chris's new book. It's called In Defense of Sex, Non-Binary Embodiment and Desire. It's out of Fordham. And it centers sex as a category that deserves theoretical consideration, like both as a non-binary form of embodiment and as a site of social desire. And the whole conversation made my brain so happy. It was one of those like moments that make you feel like a part of an academic community that's really meaningful. And so I appreciated that so much. And not for nothing, but the Great British Baking Show is back.
It is. It is back.
There's a new episode of a new season, and I like their community. I feel like their community is really great. I don't know what's going on inside that tent. I don't know like what's real and what's fake and what's kayfabe and what's like, I don't.
That's actually the one show I don't watch with Pro Wrestling Brain.
I just like, it's a competition show where people are like out to help each other and cheer on each other as they do well. And that is another like happy making moment of community for me.
Do you know the internet phrase milkshake duck?
No.
Okay. It's from a tweet from like years ago about like the internet loves milkshake duck. Everyone loves milkshake duck. And then it's like a week later, we've learned milkshake duck is racist. And it's like, right. Sure. So no one, I feel like Great British Baking Show has yet to be milkshake ducked. So
well, I
I'm
mean,
happy.
It's great. They've had a few run-ins with like not great like depictions of whatever. There's
the tacos episode.
There's some cultural stereotypes that are
I just chalked that
deservedly
up to, like,
so. No,
that's just baked into, no pun intended. That's just baked into being British.
No,
misunderstanding the rest of the world.
No, that's the whole point. Nothing is baked into any country, Michael.
I'm saying that when you have a phrase like the sun never sets on the British Empire, you're going to import some stereotypes into your
You're giving
culture.
them a pass.
I'm not giving them a pass. I'm just unsurprised.
There are several episodes like that where it's like, let's do a feature about X, and then X is kind of full of hackneyed stereotypes. But I'm still a fan of the community that is forged inside of that tent.
I actually also have a competition reality show from my cult favorite. Mine, I just finished it on Netflix, Drink Masters.
Yes.
Lovely. Tone Bell, the host of the show, is probably one of my favorite hosts of this sort of show ever.
I have seen it and I have forgotten those details. Tone Bell.
I don't know. I've never seen him before or anything else, but he's excellent in this show.
Yes. I've just Google imaged him. Yes. Yeah, he's great.
And the the show is amazing. I want there is there's a guy on the show named Tao, and I want his entire wardrobe. I've fallen in love with his wardrobe, especially his hats.
Well, you should make the algorithm on your Instagram start showing you hats instead of t-shirts.
Well, yeah, that'd be lovely. I don't. And then
start doing some Google.
But so Dream
Masters, online
shopping. Yeah, it's basically Top Chef but cocktails. And as someone who enjoys cocktails but has never been able to get into it because whatever, it got me very excited and inspired, and like, this is really interesting. But it's just wild.
I have a home bar that I can donate to you.
Do you have? I mean, they're doing stuff with like
I've got a smoker.
Foam. They have smokers. They do smokers. They have a distiller.
Do I have?
At one point, they distill French bread.
Oh no, I don't. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, I know. It was wild.
You're welcome to come over and use any tools.
And then they're making a lot of
available
foams,
to you.
Making a lot of airs, a lot of that stuff. So yeah, it was wild. It was great. I mean, I love process stuff. Like I love.
Me too.
I can listen to anyone talk about the process by which they make or do a thing.
Totally.
All that, and find it fascinating. So, check it out.
Cool.
All right, that's it. I lost the credits. Hold on.
Thank you for listening to Cult Favorite. You should join us. You can just cut in whenever. Subscribe to the podcast on Spotify or Apple. And when you subscribe, be sure to leave a rating and review if you feel like it.
You can also follow us on all the socials at Cult Favorite Pod. We'd love to hear feedback. DM us, leave us a comment on this episode in Spotify. Send us cocktail recipes. Special thanks to the Department of Religious Studies at the University of Alabama for production assistance. If you are interested in pursuing an innovative master's degree that combines social theory and digital tools, look no further than the Religion and Culture Master's Program at the University of Alabama. The program is designed to equip students with sought-after analytical communication and digital skills that can be applied in any number of careers, while rigorous coursework and original research prepare students for prestigious PhD programs as well. Thank you, Merinda. We did it.
Thanks, Mike.
We made it through.
We're both having a day. So
I'm sure this episode sounds like it went off flawlessly.
But you know what?
And we should not shatter the kayfabe of
when
that.
We are both having a day. I am. This is the highlight of my day. So it's like a little moment of forging community.
There we go.
That makes me happy.
And we will see everybody next week.
Bye.